The plasma bolt hit the Valiant's bridge without a sound. A silent, searing flash that turned the armored viewport to molten slag. For a fraction of a second, Captain Eva Rostova was silhouetted against the incandescent tear, her mouth open in a command that would never be heard. Then she was gone, consumed by the raw energy of a void-borne particle lance. Lieutenant Elena Torres was thrown from her tactical console by the explosive decompression, the shriek of escaping atmosphere, a sudden violent scream in her ears. Her helmet's emergency visors snapped down, the HUD flickering to life with a web of crimson warnings. Hull breach, life support failing, catastrophic structural integrity loss. She slammed into the rear bulkhead, the impact rattling her teeth, and scrambled for a handhold on the vibrating deck. Through the ringing in her ears, she could hear the ship groaning, the death rattle of a leviathan. The last ember of Earth's third fleet, the battleship Valiant, was dying. Outside the gash in the bridge, past the swirling debris of what was once her command center. The void-borne armada blotted out the stars. They were a storm of jagged, crystalline ships, each one bristling with weapons that defied known physics. They didn't communicate. They didn't negotiate. They simply erased whatever stood in their path. Humanity's finest warships, the pride of the Sol Federation, were now just cosmic flotsam, drifting memorials to a battle that had been lost before the first shot was fired. Elena's console sparked, its screen a mess of static. She had seen enough. The fleet was gone. The outer colonies were dark. The Voidborn were insatiable. She crawled towards the emergency comms panel, her movements clumsy in the zero-gravity chaos. "This is Lieutenant Torres of the FWS Valiant," she gasped, her voice tight with adrenaline. "All surviving hands, abandon ship. I repeat, abandon ship. Rendezvous at Emergency Point Zulu. For Earth. For the Federation." The last part was a whisper, a prayer to a deaf void. She slammed the broadcast button and pushed herself towards the escape pod corridor, the ship's final groans echoing behind her. She didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. 73 days later, the low hum of dread was the only music in Earth's skies. The jubilant broadcasts celebrating a new record for peacetime interstellar travel were a bitter memory, a cruel joke from a more naive time. The Voidborn had woven the first threads of their galactic noose, while humanity was congratulating itself on its civility. Now, that noose was tightening. Elena Torres stood before the Federation High Command, her dress uniform feeling like a costume. The faces staring back at her from the holographic council table were grim, etched with the fatigue of a losing war. Admiral Jorit, a man whose iron will was legendary, looked like a ghost. He said, "Lieutenant Torres, you are one of only a handful of ranking officers to have survived a direct engagement with the Voidborn. Your report was sobering." Elena kept her expression neutral. Sobering was one word for it. Annihilating was another. She had spent the last 2 months in debriefings, simulations, and endless, fruitless strategy sessions. Every model, every projection, ended the same way. Extinction. Jorik's gaze hardened. "We have one last option. A contingency so old it's passed into myth. It is a desperate, perhaps foolish gamble. But we have run out of conventional choices." He gestured, and a new image materialized in the center of the room. It was a ship, but unlike any she had ever seen. It was brutalist, angular, a wedge of ancient, scarred metal. It lacked the sleek, aerodynamic lines of modern Federation warships. It looked like a relic. "The Sunbird Protocol," Jorik said, his voice low. Project Sunbird was a clandestine initiative from the first expansion era, 7 centuries ago. The goal was to build a battleship that operated on principles we still do not fully understand. It was believed to be a failure. Its only prototype sealed away, and its records classified to the highest level. An old scientist on the council, Dr. Aris Thorne, cleared his throat. His eyes, magnified by thick lenses, held a glint of something that looked unnervingly like excitement. He said, the Sunbird's reactor was not a standard fusion core. The archival data, what little we have, speaks of a self-repairing polymer core and harmonic resonance power fields. It's theoretical physics, Elena. More myth than science. The ship was built, launched for a single test flight, and then permanently interred in a shielded bunker on the far side of Luna. It was deemed too unstable, too dangerous. Elena stared at the image. A rust bucket, a legend, a tomb. She asked, "And you want me to do what with it? Take it for a victory parade?" Jorik's expression did not change. "We want you to make it fly. We want you to turn that legend into a weapon. You will lead a skeleton crew to the lunar bunker. Your mission is to reactivate the Sunbird and bring it back to Earth. You will have full authority and all available resources. Dr. Thorne will lead your technical team." Elena felt a cold knot form in her stomach. This wasn't a mission. It was a suicide pact. They were sending her to chase a ghost because they had no other cards to play. But as she looked at the grim faces of the council, she saw the same desperation she had felt in the dying moments of the Valiant. They were out of time. She straightened her shoulders, the fabric of her uniform suddenly feeling less like a costume and more like a shroud. "When do I leave?" The journey to Luna was silent. The shuttle was a small utilitarian craft, its cabin filled with the tense quiet of people heading towards an unknown fate. Elena sat beside Dr. Thorne, who was muttering to himself, scrolling through ancient schematics on a datapad. His team of 4 engineers, the best the Federation had left, were huddled in the back, their faces pale. They were all that remained of the Federation's once proud corps of engineers. The bunker was a scar on the gray, pockmarked lunar surface, a massive blast-proof door set into the base of a crater. The air was thin and cold as they disembarked, the dust of the moon clinging to their boots. The door hissed open, revealing a cavernous space filled with the stale, metallic air of centuries. And there it was. The Sunbird. It was larger than the schematics had suggested, a behemoth of dark, pitted metal that seemed to absorb the light. Dust motes, undisturbed for 700 years, swirled in the beams of their flashlights. The ship's silence was profound, a sleeping giant in a forgotten tomb. Dr. Thorne approached it with the reverence of a priest entering a temple. He ran a gloved hand over the hull. He whispered, "Incredible. The alloy is unknown. No seams, no welds. It's as if it were grown, not built." One of the engineers, a young woman named Kenna, set up a portable scanner. Her brow furrowed as she read the output. She said, "Commander, the ship has no power signature. None. It's not dormant, it's dead. But there's a residual energy field in the hull itself. It's faint, but it's there. The metal is holding a charge." Elena walked the length of the ship, her boots echoing in the vast chamber. She found the main airlock, a circular hatch with a complex mechanical locking mechanism instead of a modern energy seal. "Thorne," she called out, "how do we get in?" Thorne consulted his datapad, his face illuminated by its glow. The original logs mention a manual override, a physical key. It was supposed to be stored in a vault here in the bunker. They spent the next hour searching, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. They found the vault, its door thick enough to withstand a direct nuclear strike. And standing before it, they found their first true problem. The vault's control panel was dark, its power conduits severed centuries ago. Kenna, the engineer, examined the panel. She said, "The locking mechanism is quantum encrypted. We could spend a year trying to brute force it. But the power coupling is standard. If we can get a power source here, we might be able to reboot the system." Elena looked at their shuttle. "Can we use its reactor?" Kenna shook her head. "Too much of a power differential. We'd fry the vault systems. We need something smaller, more stable, a portable fusion generator." Thorne's face fell. "We didn't bring one. We assumed the bunker's systems would be operational." For a moment, they stood in silence, the immense dead ship looming over them. Their mission, the last hope of humanity, was stalled by a locked door. Then Elena remembered the report on the bunker's layout. She asked, "The schematics showed maintenance conduits, didn't they? Tunnels running from the main hangar to the control center." Kenna's eyes lit up. "Yes. They're small, probably filled with debris, but they should lead us past the vault." It was a grueling, claustrophobic journey. The conduits were narrow, choked with dust and the debris of ages. They crawled on their hands and knees, their helmet lights cutting feeble paths through the darkness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they emerged into the bunker's control center. It was a time capsule from another era. The consoles were massive, with physical switches and monochrome screens. But in the center of the room, a single terminal was still active, powered by a small, internal battery. On its screen, a single line of text blinked in an archaic font. "Sunbird Protocol, awaiting command." Thorne rushed to the terminal, his fingers flying over the keyboard. He entered a series of codes from his datapad, his breath held in anticipation. There was a low hum, and the lights in the control center flickered to life. A synthesized voice, calm and genderless, echoed through the room. "Welcome, Administrator. Sunbird systems are dormant. Please initiate awakening sequence." Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. The ship was talking to them. Thorne, his face flushed with triumph, began the sequence. On the main view screen, a schematic of the Sunbird appeared, its systems lighting up one by one. First, atmosphere controls. They heard a deep groan from the hangar, followed by a hiss as the ship's internal filtration units awakened, pumping air through ducts that hadn't seen a single molecule in 700 years. Then, data terminals. Inside the ship, screens would be bursting into light, displaying star maps of a galaxy that no longer existed. Finally, the reactor. Thorne hesitated, his hand hovering over the final command. He said, "This is it, Commander. Once we activate the core, there's no going back. The energy readings are purely theoretical. We don't know what will happen." Elena looked at the schematic, at the dark, silent heart of the ship. She thought of the Valiant, of the faces of her crew as they were consumed by the light. She said, "Do it." Thorne pressed the key. For a long moment, nothing happened. The schematic of the reactor remained dark. Kenna muttered, "It's a dud. The core is dead." Then, a low hum began to emanate from the hangar, a sound that was felt more than heard, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to shake the very rock of the moon. On the screen, the reactor didn't light up. It pulsed, a soft, golden light that beat like a heart. The synthesized voice returned, its calm tone unchanged. Harmonic resonance core online, all systems nominal. The Sunbird is awake. The hum grew louder, the light from the hangar brighter. The ship was alive, But as they stared at the energy readings flooding the screen, a new, terrifying realization dawned on them. The Sunbird wasn't just a ship, it was a beacon, and it was screaming its existence into the void. The bridge of the Sunbird was a cathedral of ancient technology. The main viewport was a single, seamless piece of crystalline alloy that offered a panoramic view of the lunar surface. The command chair, a throne of black metal and worn leather, was situated on a raised dais, surrounded by holographic projectors and consoles with physical, satisfyingly tactile switches. Elena sat in that chair, the hum of the ship a living presence around her. It had taken them 3 days to fully explore the vessel, and they had barely scratched the surface of its mysteries. The engine core was not a machine. It was a work of art. There were no exposed circuits, no tangled cables. It was a sphere of pulsing golden light contained within a transparent, rippling force field. It powered a ship that, according to the logs they had managed to decrypt, had once crossed 8 galaxies in a single test flight. The navigation system was even stranger. It wasn't a computer. It was a giant celestial clock, an orrery of spinning gears and interlocking rings that seemed to be driven by the stars themselves. Each gear was etched with ancient, unfamiliar constellations. It was a map of a forgotten cosmos. The weapons systems were pure theory, concepts Elena had only read about in fringe scientific journals. Vacuum resonance warpers, tachyon cascade projectors. The maintenance logs, dated 2375, spoke of them as if they were standard issue. Kenna, her face smudged with grease, approached the command chair. She held up a datapad, its screen displaying a complex energy waveform. She said, "Commander, the reactor is stable, but it's putting out a subspace signal I've never seen before. It's not a communication frequency. It's a resonance, a carrier wave. And it's powerful. It's propagating faster than light. Whatever it is, the entire galaxy is hearing it." Elena looked at the star chart projected in the center of the bridge. It was updating in real time, using the ship's ancient sensors. A single, unidentified contact had just appeared at the edge of the Sol system. It was moving fast, on a direct intercept course. It wasn't a void-borne ship. The energy signature was completely different. She asked, "Can we identify it?" Kenna shook her head. "The signature doesn't match any known vessel in the Federation database. But the Sunbird's database, it has a match." She tapped her datapad, and a new image appeared on the main screen. The ship was elegant, organic, like a creature of the deep sea adapted for space. It was a Neredzan cruiser. The Neredzans were a myth, a species of aquatic humanoids mentioned in a few fragmented logs from the first expansion era. They were believed to be extinct. The synthesized voice of the Sunbird's AI spoke, its tone as calm as ever. "Alliance recognition code received. Nerezan Star Clan vessel Tidesinger requests permission to approach." Elena stared at the screen, her mind racing. The Sunbird wasn't just a weapon. It was a key designed to unlock ancient alliances. She took a deep breath. Grant them permission to approach. Open a communication channel. Let's see what our ancestors got us into. The Neredzan diplomat who appeared on the screen was a striking figure. His skin was a shimmering blue-gray, like a twilight sky, and his large, dark eyes held an unnerving intelligence. Bioluminescent markings pulsed gently on his high cheekbones. He introduced himself as Xylar. His voice was a series of clicks and whistles, translated into perfect, unaccented Federation standard by the Sunbird's comm system. Xylar said, "We are the Nerezan. We heard the song of the Sunbird and have come. It has been 7 centuries since the Covenant of Suns was broken. Elena chose her words carefully. I am Captain Elena Torres of the Sol Federation. We were not aware of any covenant. Xylar's bioluminescent markings flared. Your ancestors were. They stood with us, with the Eldorians and the Solarans, against the First Shadow. The Voidborn are not a new threat, Captain. They are an ancient one. They were defeated once, and the Sunbird was the heart of that victory. The pieces began to click into place. The strange technology, the impossible engine, the beacon. The Sunbird wasn't just humanity's creation. It was a joint effort, a product of a forgotten galactic alliance. Xylar continued. The Sunbird was not just a battleship. It was a shield. Its resonance core can disrupt the gravity-based technology of the Voidborn, turn their greatest strength into a fatal weakness. But it cannot be wielded by one species alone. Its systems require the knowledge of all 3 founding members of the Covenant. Over the next few hours, 2 more ships arrived, drawn by the Sunbird's song. The Eldorians, tall, almost skeletal beings whose eyes swirled with the light of distant galaxies, brought with them the knowledge of the ghost routes, a network of subspace tunnels that allowed for instantaneous travel across vast distances. The Solarans, fluid, graceful beings whose skin shimmered with star-like patterns, were masters of energy manipulation, their knowledge key to understanding the Sunbird's exotic weaponry. The bridge of the Sunbird became a council chamber, a meeting of ghosts from a forgotten age. They gathered around the celestial clock of the navigation core, their combined knowledge unlocking its secrets. The Eldorian diplomat, a being named Lyra, traced a luminous line on the holographic star chart. She said, "The ghost routes are still there, but they are unstable. Only the Sunbird's navigation core can safely map them." The Solaran, whose name was Helios, pointed to the schematics of the weapon systems. He said, "The tachyon projectors are not weapons of brute force. They are surgical instruments. They can create micro-singularities, warping space-time itself. But they require precise energy modulation, a skill my people have not practiced for generations." It was a puzzle, and each species held a piece. Humanity had the ship, the physical key. The Neredzans understood its defensive capabilities, the resonance fields that could counter the Voidborn. The Eldorians knew the paths, the secret ways through the galaxy. And the Solarans knew how to wield its power. Elena felt a surge of hope, the first she had felt since the fall of the Valiant. But it was a fragile hope. The alliance was new, untested. The species had not spoken in centuries. There was mistrust, old grievances. She was the link, the human element that had to bind them together. She addressed the council, her voice steady. The Voidborn are at our doorstep. Earth is their next target. We do not have time for old grudges. We must learn to trust each other again. We must reforge the Covenant of Suns. The Sunbird is our shared legacy. Let us use it to build a shared future. She looked from face to face, from the swirling galaxies in Lyra's eyes to the pulsing light of Xylar's skin. She saw her own hope reflected there, a fragile beacon in the face of overwhelming darkness. The council was silent for a moment. Then Xylar, the Nerezan, gave a slow, deliberate nod. His bioluminescent markings pulsed with a steady, determined light. He said, "The Nerezan Star Clan stands with the Federation. We will honor the old covenant." Lyra and Helios followed suit. The alliance was reborn. Their first target was a place marked on the ancient star charts as Sector Theta 12, a volatile region of space where the Voidborn were massing their fleet for the final assault on Earth. It was a battleground, a nexus, and it was where they would make their stand. The bridge of the Sunbird was a symphony of controlled chaos. Elena stood on the command dais, the once silent ship now thrumming with the combined energy of 4 species working as one. Neresan technicians monitored the resonance fields, their clicks and whistles a constant stream of data. Eldorian pilots charted a course through the ghost routes, their long, delicate fingers dancing over holographic controls. Solarans modulated the energy flow from the reactor, their bodies swaying in time with the ship's rhythmic pulse. And at the center of it all, the human crew, Elena's crew, worked to integrate the disparate systems, to translate, to coordinate, to bind the fragile alliance together. Kenna's voice cut through the hum. "Commander, we are approaching the ghost route entry point. The Eldorians say the passage will be turbulent." Elena gripped the arms of her command chair. All hands, brace for subspace transition. The ship shuddered, a violent, bone-jarring tremor. The viewport, which had shown the familiar stars of the Sol system, dissolved into a swirling vortex of impossible colors. They were in the ghost route, a river of space-time flowing between the cracks of the universe. The journey was instantaneous and eternal. They emerged into the stark, cold reality of Sector Theta 12. The view was breathtaking and terrifying. A fleet of Voidborn ships, hundreds of them, hung in the blackness, arranged in a complex crystalline formation around a central point of darkness, a gravity well so intense it bent the light of the stars around it. That was the nexus, the heart of their fleet. Kenna reported, "We have the element of surprise, Commander. They haven't detected us yet." Elena's mind raced, processing the tactical data flooding her screen. The Voidborn fleet was arranged in a defensive posture, their gravity wells overlapping to create an impenetrable shield. A direct assault was suicide. But they didn't need a direct assault. They had the Sunbird. She turned to her new allies. "Xylar, can your resonance fields disrupt their formation?" The Neresan nodded. "We can create a harmonic dissonance, a wave of anti-gravity that will momentarily neutralize their wells. But the effect will be temporary. We will have 1, perhaps 2 minutes of vulnerability." Elena looked at Lyra. "Can you get us close enough to the Nexus in that time?" The Eldorian's galaxy-filled eyes stared at the swirling chaos of the Voidborn fleet. She said, "There is a path, a narrow corridor between their gravity fields. It is a dangerous path, but it is there." Finally, Elena turned to Helios. "And when we get there, can you destroy it?" The Solaran's shimmering form seemed to burn brighter. He said, "The tachyon projectors are ready. A single, focused burst should be enough to collapse the Nexus." The plan was simple, elegant, and ridiculously dangerous. It relied on perfect timing, perfect coordination, and a level of trust that had been forged only hours before. Elena took a deep breath, the recycled air of the bridge tasting of ozone and anticipation. She gave the order. "Let's go to work." The Sunbird moved like a ghost, slipping through the gaps in the Voidborn sensor net. The Eldorian pilots navigated the treacherous currents of the gravity fields with a skill that was breathtaking. The ship danced on the edge of a razor, the pull of the Voidborn wells a constant, threatening presence. They were close now, so close they could see the intricate, crystalline details of the enemy ships. The Nexus was a swirling vortex of pure darkness, a hole in the fabric of space. Kenna's voice was tense. "They've seen us. They're reconfiguring their wells. We're running out of time." Elena's voice was calm, a rock in the swirling storm of the battle. "Xylar, Now, the Nerezan technicians moved as one. A wave of invisible energy, a silent scream of anti-gravity, erupted from the Sunbird. On the main screen, the complex web of the Voidborn's gravity wells flickered, their dark energy neutralized. The defensive shield was down. "Go!" Elena yelled. The Sunbird surged forward, a silver arrow aimed at the heart of the Voidborn fleet. Alarms blared as enemy ships turned to intercept, their particle lances firing in a desperate, chaotic barrage. The ship shuddered as plasma bolts impacted against its ancient hull, the metal glowing with the strain. Helios. Fire. The Solaran technicians worked in a blur of motion. Energy from the reactor was channeled to the forward tachyon projectors. A beam of pure, white light, a needle of focused space-time, shot from the front of the Sunbird. It struck the Nexus, the heart of the Voidborn fleet. For a moment, there was only silence. The vortex of darkness seemed to absorb the beam, to swallow it whole. Then, it began to collapse. The darkness folded in on itself, the gravity well reversing, becoming a singularity. The Voidborn ships closest to the Nexus were torn apart, their crystalline hulls shattering like glass. The rest of the fleet, their coordination gone, their greatest weapon turned against them, fell into disarray. It was a rout. The battle was over, but the cost had been high. The Sunbird was heavily damaged, its hull scorched and pitted. The resonance fields were offline, the tachyon projectors drained. They had won, but they were wounded, vulnerable. And as the last of the Voidborn fleet fled into the darkness, a new, single contact appeared on their long-range scanners. It was a ship of immense size, a vessel that dwarfed even the Sunbird. Its energy signature was one they recognized. It was the Voidborn command ship. It had been waiting, observing. And now, it was coming for them. The bridge of the Sunbird was a place of grim silence. The elation of their victory had evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard reality of their situation. They were damaged, their primary weapons useless, and they were facing a Voidborn dreadnought, a ship that could, by itself, lay waste to an entire star system. Kenna's voice was barely a whisper. "Commander, its weapons are charging. We have 90 seconds until they fire." Elena stared at the image of the dreadnought on the main screen. It was a monster, a mountain of jagged black crystal. There was no escape. The ghost routes were too unstable to navigate in their damaged state. The main engines were too slow. This was it. This was where it ended. She looked at her crew, at the tired, determined faces of the humans, the Nerezans, the Eldorians, the Solarans. They had come together, had forged an alliance from the ashes of a forgotten history. They had won an impossible victory. They would not die here, cowering in the dark. She turned to Thorn, who was frantically working at a science station. "Doctor," she said, her voice steady. "The reactor. You said it was a harmonic resonance core. What does that mean?" Thorn looked up, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying idea. He said, "It means it's a tuner. It can be attuned to different frequencies, different energies. The subspace signal it sent out, that was just its default state. It can be retuned." Elena's gaze was intense. "Can you tune it to the frequency of the Voidborn's energy weapons?" Thorn's blood ran cold. "Commander, the feedback would be catastrophic. It would overload the core. The ship, it would be destroyed." "But what would it do to them?" Elena pressed. Thorn hesitated. "Their weapons are gravity-based. If we were to channel that energy back at them on their own frequency, it would create a feedback loop, a cascade failure. It would unmake them, a suicide play, a final, desperate gambit. Elena looked at the countdown on the screen. 60 seconds. She made her decision. Do it. The crew stared at her, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Then, one by one, they turned back to their stations. Xylar, Lyra, Helios. They all understood. This was the only way. They worked with a desperate, focused intensity. Thorn and the Solaran technicians retuned the reactor, their hands flying over the controls. The golden light of the core began to shift, to darken, its gentle hum rising to a keening shriek. The Nerezans and Eldorians rerouted all remaining power to the containment fields, their last, futile attempt to hold back the inevitable. 30 seconds. The Voidborn dreadnought fired. A beam of pure, crushing gravity, a wave of physical force that warped the space in front of it, shot towards the Sunbird. Elena gripped her command chair, her knuckles white. She looked at the faces of her crew, her family, and she felt not fear, but a profound, quiet pride. 10 seconds. The beam struck. The ship screamed, the containment fields shattering, the reactor overloading. For a single blinding moment, the Sunbird became a star, a nova of golden light and raw, untamed energy. The feedback loop was instantaneous. The energy of the Voidborn's own weapon, amplified 1,000 times, traveled back up the beam, a virus of pure chaotic power. The dreadnought, the monster of the void, dissolved. It did not explode. It simply ceased to be. Its crystalline structure unmade, its atoms scattered to the four corners of the universe. The light of the Sunbird's death faded, leaving only silence and the cold, distant light of the stars. The war was over. The echoes of the Sunbird's sacrifice rippled across the galaxy. The Voidborn, their command structure shattered, their fleet in disarray, retreated into the dark spaces between the stars. They were not gone, but they were broken. In the months that followed, a new galactic society began to form. The Nerezans, the Eldorians, the Solarans, and the humans, bound by their shared sacrifice, laid the foundations of a new covenant. Sector Theta 12, once a battleground, became a council zone, the site of the first galactic compact in 700 years. Humanity, once a fledgling, isolated species on the brink of extinction, now had a seat at the table. They were no longer observers, but participants, their voice equal among the star-faring races of the galaxy. They brought with them the lessons of their long, often bloody history, their resilience, their adaptability, their unyielding, stubborn hope. The legacy of the Sunbird was not one of war, but of unity. Its story was told on 100 worlds, a legend of a forgotten alliance reborn, of a desperate final stand that had saved them all. And at the heart of that legend was the story of its crew, of the 4 species who had come together to face the darkness, and of the human captain who had led them, who had made the final, impossible choice. Elena Torres and her crew were not forgotten. They were the first heroes of a new age, their names etched into the cornerstone of the new galactic compact building on Theta 12. They were a reminder that even in the darkest of times, when all hope seems lost, courage, sacrifice, and unity can reshape a galaxy. The dawn had not just arrived. It was radiating outward, a bright, defiant glow against the encroaching darkness, a promise of a shared, united future. A future born from struggle, fortified by unity, and bright with boundless promise.